Welcome to Trending Unpacked, the show where we explore the stories behind the trends shaping our world. It is October 2025, and well, everywhere you look, the business of being terrified is absolutely booming.
It really is. You can't escape it.
Yeah, whether you are scrolling through, TikTok or Instagram Reels, or maybe strapping on a VR headset for the latest game.
Or just going to one of those pop-up haunted houses. They're everywhere now.
Exactly. And the core currency, the thing they all seem to rely on, it remains the same, the jump scare.
That sudden explosive jolt, it's utterly pervasive right now, isn't it?
It really is.
We see it not just fueling the traditional horror films that seem to stream relentlessly these days, but dominating those short-form video feeds like TikTok, these really condensed, super shareable moments of just shock.
Pure reaction fuel.
Yeah, and it's still the basic building block of modern physical scare experiences, the haunted trails and things like that, and of course a constant element in interactive gaming.
It really feels like this year, maybe this month especially, the sheer volume and the accessibility of the jump scare have really peaked.
Definitely feels that way.
We all know that physical sensation, right? That sudden rush of panic and adrenaline.
Yeah, the heart skips a beat.
But our goal today is maybe to look past that initial feeling. We need to dissect the actual technique behind it.
Get under the hood a bit.
Yeah, explore its profound psychological roots, maybe trace its surprisingly subtle cinematic origins.
Yeah.
Because it didn't start where most people think.
No, it didn't.
And just try to figure out why we, as supposedly sophisticated consumers, constantly pay money or spend our time lining up to, well, invite temporary terror into our lives.
It's a great question. We're basically going to unpack this mechanism because you're right. It's far more clever than just, a monster leaping out from the shadows.
Right.
It requires understanding misdirection, definitely sound design that's crucial, and fundamentally the lightning-fast reactions of the human brain. So we need to understand not only how it's deployed across all these diverse mediums, film, games, haunted houses, TikTok, but why it works so infallibly, even when our conscious mind is practically yelling at us, watch out, it's coming.
Yeah, why do we still jump? That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this then. If we strip away all the atmosphere, the story, the characters, what is the jump scare in purely technical terms? Because, critics often dismiss it. They say it's low effort, maybe lazy filmmaking.
Right, the cheap scare.
Exactly. But its mechanics seem highly specific when you look closer.
They really are. From a media production standpoint, it's a deliberate technique. It's specifically used to provoke an immediate, involuntary physiological reaction in the viewer.
Involuntary is key.
Totally key. It is the calculated use of a sudden, drastic, and usually unexpected change. That change could be in the image or the sound, or critically, both happening at once.
Okay.
And the singular intent is just to startle you. It's designed to completely override your rational thought and go straight for the gut reaction.
The multisensory component you mentioned, the image and sound, that feels like where the real magic or maybe the real manipulation happens, right?
Absolutely.
Because if I just show you like a really horrific image, maybe something gory, it might evoke disgust or dread, sure, but it might not make you physically jump.
That's a great point. Disgust and startle are different responses.
So it's the sound then, that piercing shriek or the sudden musical stab, that stinger sound, or even just a rapid high-frequency thud. That's the primary trigger for the physical flinch.
That's really the kernel of the idea, yeah. Auditory stimulation, it bypasses our conscious visual processing speed to some extent. Our ears are just incredibly finely tuned, evolutionarily speaking, to detect sudden changes in our environment.
Like a twig snapping behind us in the woods.
Exactly that kind of thing. That sudden sound signifies a potential threat. So if a filmmaker or a game designer wants to absolutely guarantee a jolt, they spike the volume dramatically, often way louder than the surrounding audio.
You notice that?
You do. And they often introduce specific kinds of noises, high-frequency sounds that our brain instinctively associates with alarm. Things like a scream, breaking glass, a sudden hiss.
Things that signal danger.
Precisely. They're tapping into very old warning signals.
Okay, but to really understand the craft of it, not just the brute force, we have to look back. Where did this, let's say, more subtle art of the jump scare begin to be weaponized in storytelling? Where did this foundational element of modern horror truly emerge?
Right, because it wasn't always just about loudness. Many people, like I mentioned, probably associate it with the loud 1980s slasher films Friday the 13th, that sort of thing.
Yeah, Jason jumping out from behind a tree with a huge cord cracks.
Exactly. But the technique of using misdirection and using sound as the actual shock mechanism that was pioneered decades earlier, we really need to look to the 1940s.
40s, wow.
Yeah, specifically to RKO Pictures' B-Unit horror films. They were produced by a guy named Val Lewton, and the key film, the one everyone points to, is Cat People from 1942.
Ah, the famous Lewton bus technique.
Yeah.
I've heard of this. This is fascinating because it demonstrated that the audience's own expectation, their own imagination, could be the ultimate weapon against them.
Precisely. That's the genius of it. The famous scene involves the protagonist, her name is Alice, and she's walking alone at night, down a quiet city street near a stone wall under some trees. Very atmospheric.
Okay.
And she's convinced she's being stalked by this shadowy figure. A figure that may or may not be her rival, Irina, who might be able to turn into a monstrous cat, hence the title.
Got it. So the tension is already there.
Immense tension. The scene is masterful in its pacing. You get these long shots, deep shadows, almost absolute silence except for her footsteps clicking on the pavement. The tension builds and builds to an almost agonizing pitch because the audience, having been conditioned by earlier, maybe cruder horror films, is absolutely waiting for the monster, for the Catwoman to leap out from the darkness.
We're conditioned to look for the visual threat, aren't we? The shape and the shadows, the eyes, the claws.
Exactly. We're scanning the frame for it. But the genius of Lewton and his director Jacques Tourneur is that they deny the visual threat entirely. It never comes.
So happens.
Instead, just as the tension becomes unbearable when Alice herself looks like she's about to break, a seemingly mundane element, something totally unrelated to the supernatural plot, a city bus suddenly rounds the corner behind her, and it slams on its air brakes with this terrifying, sudden, loud hiss screech.
Ah, just a bus.
Just a bus. The noise obviously startles the character. Alice jumps. But more importantly, it violently releases the audience's accumulated tension. You jump with her.
Wow. So instead of delivering the expected visual horror, the cat monster Lewton substitutes it with a completely unexpected, jarring acoustic event.
Yes, and it kind of confirms that the danger wasn't where they were looking, but they were still right to be on edge. It validates the dread, but through misdirection.
But wait a minute, isn't that kind of cheating? If the big scare is just a bus, how does that count as horror? Weren't audiences maybe frustrated, like, that's it?
You'd think so, maybe. But contemporary accounts suggest they were galvanized, far from frustrated. What made it revolutionary was that it proved the preparation, the atmosphere, the buildup of dread, the expectation is actually more important than the literal content of the scare itself.
Okay, the journey, not the destination.
In a way, yes. It establishes that the sudden jump isn't really the source of the fear. It's the psychological payoff for all the preceding dread you've been feeling. It taught filmmakers how to weaponize the audience's own nervous system, their own anticipation.
So it created a reliable formula, almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A formula based on build anticipation, use misdirection, make them look the wrong way, and then punctuate it with a sudden acoustic shock. Visual optional, almost.
That technique, that core idea, it really does feel like the gold standard, doesn't it? But now, that foundational concept is adapted across wildly different platforms. So how has the modern execution of the jump scare evolved? Thinking about films, games, live events, they all engage the audience so differently.
Yeah, the deployment today is highly specialized, depending on the medium. Let's consider traditional films and streaming first. That's probably the most familiar context.
Okay.
Here, the jump scare often functions like a narrative punctuation mark. It's carefully placed in the editing suite. The director controls everything. The camera might focus on a seemingly safe space, maybe linger a bit too long.
You feel it coming.
Right, you feel it.
Yeah.
The music often drops out, creating that anticipatory silence, which is almost worse than noise.
Mm-hmm.
And then bang, a rapid cut, maybe a zoom, and that sound spike hits you. The director retains total control over the timing and the impact.
Okay, so complete control in film.
Yeah.
What about interactive games? That feels different.
Games introduce player agency, and that fundamentally changes the psychological dynamic. It's huge. In a game like, say, Five Nights at Freddy's or Alien, isolation.
Classic of the genre.
Definitely.
Okay.
The jump scare is often tied directly to something the player does or fails to do. You open the wrong locker. You turn the wrong corner without checking. You run out of power or time.
So it feels like your fault.
Precisely. This makes the player feel a direct sense of responsibility for activating the terror. When you jump in a game like that, there's often an immediate overlay of guilt or frustration because you made the mistake. You triggered it.
That's a crucial difference, isn't it? The fear of a film is external, something you observe. But the fear of a game can feel internal, almost self-inflicted.
Very much so. It adds another layer to the experience.
And then you move into the real world, the live physical spaces.
Yeah.
The haunted attractions, the scare trails, immersive theater.
Right. These environments, they often treat the jump scare as a kind of guaranteed, almost commodified physical adrenaline delivery system. It's what people pay for.
The main event.
Often, yeah. They rely heavily on manipulating your spatial awareness and your sense of proximity. They know exactly which visual blind spots to utilize in a dark corridor. They know where to position an actor, or maybe a pneumatic prop, or an animatronic.
Like something dropping from the ceiling or a sudden blast of compressed air.
Exactly. A drop panel in the wall. Things designed to achieve a guaranteed physical reaction from someone who is already hyper-aware, probably already on edge, because they know they're in a vulnerable position walking through a dark, unfamiliar space.
It's pure stimulus response in that setting.
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
Though the best ones still use atmosphere and theme.
Okay, that perfectly bridges us to the trend that seems to be dominating this October. The highly compressed, totally viral, super shareable scare we see online.
Yeah, here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit weird. Our sources, people tracking online trends, confirm a massive surge in what are being called Halloween jump scare videos, especially on platforms like TikTok and YouTube Shorts, just this month, October 2025.
Okay.
It is essentially the jump scare stripped of almost all narrative context, boiled down to its most chemically pure, reactive form.
It's the ultimate consumable content, isn't it? Like fast food for fear. That's a good way to put it. We're talking about videos that might only last 5 to 7 seconds total.
So short. Incredibly short. It could be quick pranks where someone jumps out, or unexpected costume reveals that are designed to shock, or just really fast, jarring edits designed purely to provoke a filmable, shareable reaction from the person watching, or the person being filmed watching. It's shock as entertainment distilled.
And the implication here is profound, actually, that the physiological mechanism, the jump reflex itself, is so robust, so hardwired, that doesn't even need the classic Luton-style narrative buildup anymore. Not always, anyway.
It seems not for this format. It has been atomized, broken down into this tiny, potent package. You click on the clip, you probably know the genre from the thumbnail or the tags. You know the format.
Yeah.
You might even guess what's coming.
And yet
the creators are still proving that even with that foreknowledge, the jump often still lands. It still gets you.
Wow.
It's almost biological proof that the core physiological trigger that amygdala response we'll talk about is simply faster than our rational conscious awareness that says, this isn't real, or I know what's happening.
It effectively transforms the viewer's involuntary startle into a shareable commodity. A piece of viral entertainment where the viewer's raw, immediate reaction is the product being consumed and shared.
Exactly. Your jump becomes the content. #3. Internet theories and cultural interpretations.
Okay, now we absolutely have to move into the why. We know what it is, technically. We know where it came from, how it's used. But why does this basic mechanism work so reliably on the human body? Whether we are watching a film from 1942 or a 7-second TikTok right now. Let's dive into the psychology behind the jolt.
Right, and this is entirely rooted in evolutionary biology. It's deep stuff. The psychological model tells us that jump scares trigger our ancient, deeply hardwired survival mechanisms. This isn't really about learned fear, like being afraid of spiders because you had a bad experience. It's not about cultural anxieties initially anyway. It's about immediate, non-negotiable threat detection.
Survival 101.
Pretty much. So break down that chain reaction for us. What happens in the brain and body the very moment that loud noise hits or that sudden image appears on screen?
Okay, so the initial phase is completely involuntary. You can't stop it. We call it the startle reflex or the startle response. The sensory input, that sudden sound, maybe a sudden visual shift, it essentially bypasses your cerebral cortex. That's your rational thinking center, the part that analyzes things calmly.
It skips the manager, goes straight to security.
That's a perfect analogy. It rockets straight to the amygdala. The amygdala is like our brain's instantaneous threat detector, the panic button. It receives that sudden input, and it doesn't waste time asking questions like, is this real? It just slams the emergency brake. Or maybe the accelerator, depending how you look at it.
So you're telling me that no matter how much I consciously tell myself, it's just a movie, it's just a TikTok, my body literally can't listen to that instruction in the first milliseconds. Because the instinctual brain fires first. Precisely. The amygdala initiates the fight or flight response before your consciousness, your prefrontal cortex, has even fully registered and interpreted the image or the sound. It's already happening.
Wow.
It triggers the release of a massive surge of neurotransmitters and hormones, primarily adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol, straight into your system. This is an immediate, involuntary chemical cocktail. It's designed to flood your body with energy for immediate action.
What does that feel like physically?
Well, your heart rate spikes dramatically, your blood pressure increases, your muscles tense up, ready to spring, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid, taking in more oxygen, your pupils might dilate to let in more light. The physical jump we make, that flinch or recoil, is literally our body initiating an escape sequence, a preemptive defensive reaction to perceived danger.
So that's the neurological hack we're talking about, the one we voluntarily subject ourselves to when we watch horror or click on that TikTok. A temporary but quite intense system overload, but in a safe context.
Exactly. And that brings us to the next big question.
Mm-hmm.
Why? It's fascinating that we choose to invite this massive physiological response. What's so compelling about triggering our survival instincts for fun? Why do we, in a perfectly safe environment, seek out moments that mimic mortal danger?
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive.
This moves us firmly into the cultural model of fear consumption. Why do we consume scary media? The core reason we invite the scare, the theory goes, is precisely because the environment is explicitly, definitively safe. We know it's not real.
We have control.
We have ultimate control, whether we are in a comfy cinema seat, cozy on our sofa at home, or even standing in a queue for a haunted house where we know actors are involved. The danger is entirely confined. It's theoretical, it's pretend, it's controlled fear.
The stakes are effectively zero, even if the physical experience feels incredibly high octane for a second or two.
Right. And the essential element that transforms that brief moment of panic into actual entertainment is the feeling of catharsis and relief that follows almost immediately.
The exhale after the jump.
That's it. The massive adrenaline rush is met milliseconds later by the conscious realization, I am okay, that wasn't real, this was fake. That safe return to baseline, back to normal, that's the payoff. We feel like we survived a crisis, however manufactured it was.
Right.
And the resulting feeling of relief, maybe even mild euphoria from that hormonal dump clearing out, it can be incredibly satisfying, pleasurable even. It's highly entertaining for many people to go through a simulation of immediate threat and then just walk away completely unharmed.
You get the rush without the risk.
Yeah.
We see that safety mechanism totally commodified in places like haunted houses, don't we?
Yeah.
Where you absolutely expect the jumps and the guarantee of survival, of getting out the exit door at the end, is part of the deal.
Absolutely. Those businesses are literally selling the biological response, the startle, and the guaranteed relief that follows. It's a structured experience designed meticulously to deliver maximum physiological impact, but always with a clear, safe exit strategy. You know you're getting out.
Okay, and now let's try and apply that cultural understanding, that safe fear idea, to the digital paradox we talked about, the social media landscape, where jump scares are often memes or prank videos or highly predictable edits. In these digital formats, we're often kind of in on the joke, right? We often know what's coming, or at least what type of thing is coming.
Yeah, this is where it gets layered. The
Yeah.
sources suggest this is where the social element becomes really vital. We often watch these clips not just for our own potential jolt, although that's part of it, but often for the schadenfreude, that little bit of dark pleasure we get from watching someone else react violently. Maybe it's the target of the prank, or a streamer we follow reacting live on camera.
We're anticipating their fear response.
Exactly. And anticipating their fear and then watching it happen becomes a kind of shared secondary form of enjoyment. We laugh with them or maybe slightly at them after the fact.
Okay, that makes sense for watching others. But the core question still remains for me. If I am watching a clip, and I know a loud face is probably coming in the next second,
Yeah.
why do I still jump sometimes? It feels silly afterward.
It does, but it comes back to biology again. The surprise response, that amygdala pathway, is involuntary and just extremely fast. You can consciously know the image is arriving, maybe even brace for it.
Right.
But the amygdala operates milliseconds faster than your prefrontal cortex. That's the part of your brain doing the conscious processing, the part that says, relax, it's just a cat in a rubber mask on TikTok. The sheer speed of consumption on platforms like TikTok and Shorts actually facilitates this. It delivers this visceral, non-narrative hit very efficiently. It bypasses context almost entirely.
Okay, the speed beats the thought. So this raises a pretty important question then. What does it mean for our culture, more broadly, that we seem to be consuming fear, or at least a simulation of fear, in such quick, often context-divorced bursts? Are we maybe inadvertently training ourselves or our attention spans to value that immediate spike and drop of emotion over more sustained, maybe more complex emotional engagement?
That's a really insightful question. It definitely could point toward a cultural preference, or maybe just a habituation, toward instant gratification in emotional experiences. The jump scare, especially in its super condensed digital form, provides maximum emotional output, that big adrenaline spike, for absolutely minimal time investment.
High impact, low commitment.
Precisely. It is incredibly efficient in today's attention economy, which of course makes it an incredibly powerful and repeatable commodity for content creators.
But this very efficiency, this potential for overuse, brings us right to the inevitable critique, doesn't it? The argument we hear all the time, especially from horror aficionados. That the overuse of the jump scare is simply lazy horror filmmaking, the cheap trick.
Yes, we see this discussion constantly in film criticism, online forums, everywhere people talk about horror. The core critique states that when a creator relies exclusively, or even just predominantly, on sudden loud noises and rapid image shifts, without taking the time to build character we care about or genuine atmosphere or sustain dread, then they're basically using the scare as a crutch. A cheap trick to get a reaction when the story or tension isn't strong enough on its own.
And the effect wears off, right?
It is. If you rely too heavily on it, film after film, or even within the same film, you stop actually scaring the audience in a meaningful way, and you just start, well, annoying them or boring them.
It stops being a tool for storytelling and starts being a substitute for storytelling. The moment I realize, okay, every time it gets quiet, there's going to be a loud bang. I just start anticipating the noise, not the monster or the threat. I just brace myself for the sound cue.
And that's exactly where the craft is lost. Think of certain contemporary horror films or franchises, a director leaning too heavily on just noise cues, maybe like in some entries in the Insidious franchise, some critics might argue, trains the audience to just focus on that predictable acoustic rhythm. It actually deflates the true tension because you know the pattern.
Yeah.
Conversely, think of films like, say, The Babadook or It Follows. They build this incredible, sustained atmospheric dread over long periods. They make the absence of the jump scare almost terrifying. You're constantly on edge, waiting for something that might not even come.
So that when a startle does occur,
Exactly. If and when a startle does occur in films like that, it often feels deeply meaningful, even shocking in a different way, because it pays off a specific narrative thread or character fear you've been invested in. It's not random. The difference is the intention behind the jolt and its integration.
so the conversation, at least among creators and critics, seemed to have matured a bit. We've acknowledged the sheer potency of the mechanism, the biological reality of it. But there's a growing demand, maybe, to hold creators accountable for its thoughtful deployment, for integrating it into the narrative properly.
I think that's fair to say, yeah. The discussion is definitely moving beyond just jump scares good or jump scares bad.
Okay, so if we try to connect all this to the bigger picture, how can we, as the consumers, the audience members, maybe start to distinguish between the effective scare, the one that genuinely serves the story and enhances the experience, and the lazy trick that's just designed to make us spill our popcorn?
That's the crucial question for appreciating the craft, isn't it? The key metric, according to many sources analyzing the genre, really comes down to that word, integration, as you touched on earlier.
Integration.
Yeah. A genuinely good jump scare is integrated into story and experience. It feels like the moment when the tension, which the audience has been carefully absorbing maybe for minutes, finally snaps in a way that makes narrative sense. It has to feel, in retrospect at least, narratively necessary, not just thrown in.
Can you give me a conceptual example, like what makes one integrated and another not?
Sure. Let's take the idea of an established threat. Imagine a character spends 10 minutes creeping through an old house because they keep hearing this distinct tapping sound coming from the locked attic. The atmosphere is thick, they're clearly scared of what's up there.
Okay, classic setup.
Right. Now, a cheap jump scare in that scenario would be if, while they're nervously approaching the attic door, suddenly a distorted face just appears in a dusty mirror on the wall beside them, accompanied by a loud shriek.
Totally unrelated to the attic tapping.
Exactly. It's random, it provides a jolt, sure, but it doesn't resolve or connect to the specific source of dread that the scene spent 10 minutes building. Now, an integrated, effective jump scare in that same scenario might be the tapping from the attic stops suddenly. Silence. The character visibly sighs, maybe lowers their guard for a split second, thinking it's over. And then the figure, or whatever was making the noise from the attic, suddenly drops down directly behind them or bursts through the door. The noise, the sudden jolt, relates directly back to the specific source of the dread we spent 10 minutes anticipating. It pays off the setup.
Ah, okay. So the bad jump scare feels arbitrary, just thrown in for reaction. But the good jump scare feels almost inevitable in hindsight. It feels earned by the story.
That's a great way to put it. Earned. The bad jump scare, conversely, often feels like it's just relying on the loud sound spikes simply because the pacing lagged, or maybe the director felt the scene was getting boring. It's like noise pollution designed just to jolt a passive audience awake again.
Right.
If it reduces the overall tension because it feels predictable or meaningless, or if it makes the actual plot feel irrelevant compared to the next loud noise, then it's probably just a commodity shock, not crafted horror.
Despite these critiques, though, and the potential for overuse leading to annoyance, the jump scare itself continues to thrive, doesn't it? It's clearly not going away. Why do you think this core technique keeps evolving and adapting rather than fading away like some other cinematic gimmicks have?
Well, I think fundamentally it's because it works on that deep biological level we discussed. It exploits a neurological pathway, that amygdala response, that is incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible for us to consciously shut down or ignore completely. It guarantees a physical reaction.
It's reliable.
Extremely reliable, and crucially, it's also incredibly versatile. It's proving capable of adapting to new formats, new technologies that challenge the very concept of a static screen or a passive viewer.
You mentioned games earlier, which are highly interactive. But let's talk about the absolute cutting edge. Things like virtual reality, VR, and augmented reality, AR. How does the technique shift when the audience is literally inside the environment?
Oh, the evolution there is profoundly spatial. In VR, the jump scare is no longer limited to appearing in front of you on the screen. It can come from absolutely anywhere. Behind you, above you, below you, right beside your ear.
Because you're in a 360-degree environment.
Exactly. The director or the game designer gains immense new power by being able to manipulate your peripheral vision, your sense of presence, and forcing you to rely heavily on directional audio cues within a fully realized immersive space. The element of surprise becomes truly physical and spatialized in a way that traditional film can only hint at.
Wow.
It transforms that basic startle reflex into a potential full-body, high-fidelity sensory experience. The feeling of vulnerability is massively amplified.
Okay, so it gets more intense in VR. And then on the completely other end of the technological spectrum, in that hyper-condensed social media format we discussed, the TikToks and Shorts, it thrives there too,
Right.
but by becoming ultra-efficient.
Precisely. It's stripped down, perfect for rapid consumption, instant reaction, and easy sharing. So the jump scare has proven its resilience across this huge spectrum. It's shifted from being a subtle atmospheric tool in the 1940s with Luton to becoming this hyper-modern, often decontextualized digital commodity today. And it's finding new life in immersive VR.
It really demonstrates that the tool itself isn't inherently good or bad, is it? It's the application, the craft, the intention behind it that matters. When used skillfully, with purpose, it remains a genuinely powerful instrument for narrative engagement, for creating memorable moments.
Absolutely. It's all about how and why it's used.
So, bringing it all together then, what does this enduring, complex popularity stretching all the way from cat people to TikTok pranks really say about us? About our culture? What does our continued interest in deliberately triggering this neurological hack reflect?
I think it reflects a deep and maybe growing cultural interest in exploring the parameters of fear itself, but, and this is the crucial part, almost always exploring it from a position of absolute safety.
We like to visit the edge, but not fall over.
Exactly. We seem to crave that physiological response, that jolt of adrenaline, that sudden, involuntary reminder that we are alive and alert. It makes us feel something intense immediately, but we absolutely require the guarantee of the earned relief that follows. The knowledge that it wasn't real, that we are okay.
We want the chaos, but only for a strictly limited moment, and only with the guaranteed return to order right afterward. It's a very low-risk way to feel intensely alive, I suppose.
That sums it up perfectly. And the fact that we are having these conversations, that audiences and critics are demanding more craftful integration, that we criticize the lazy or overuse of the jolt, that suggests something important too.
Exactly.
It suggests that we don't just want to be startled anymore, not purely. We want that startle to serve a higher purpose within a story. We want fear to be used as a potent ingredient in storytelling, not just as sensory noise designed to make us jump. We seem to be seeking meaning even in our momentary terror.
It really speaks volumes that we're sitting here analyzing the quality of the startle, doesn't it? Parsing the psychology behind why a sudden bus break in 1942 might be genuinely terrifying in context, while a cheap monster randomly popping up in the foreground today might just be annoying.
Right. It highlights that it's so often about the narrative setup, the anticipation, the context, not necessarily the literal content of the shock itself.
And that search for meaning, for integrated experience, is probably exactly what keeps this technique alive. It forces creators who want to be effective to continually innovate and refine how they use it.
I think so. The audience expectation evolves.
Well, this analysis certainly provides some much-needed context for why I definitely jumped while watching one of those viral 7-second clips this morning, even though I absolutely knew the jump was the entire point of the video.
See? The knowledge of the mind still loses to the speed of the body sometimes.
Clearly. It's humbling, in a way.
It is. And maybe a final thought for you, for everyone listening to consider is this. Next time you jump, whether you're in a dark theater, watching the latest horror release, playing a VR game, or just scrolling through your phone take a millisecond after your heart rate settles.
Okay.
And just recognize what actually caused the fear response. Maybe it's less about the monster on screen or the actor jumping out or the sudden sound change, the external stimulus itself.
Yeah.
And maybe it's more about the fact that your nervous system, were perfectly primed and ready for that threat signal. It's really a testament to the fact that your ancient survival mechanism is always there, always operating just below the surface, constantly scanning, waiting for the smallest cue to confirm potential danger, even when you consciously feel completely safe and relaxed. In a way, the true star of every jump scare is your own involuntary, brilliantly fast neurological response system. You're built to react. #5, outro and teaser.
That's a fascinating way to think about it. Thanks for listening to Trending Unpacked. Whether you secretly love the jump or publicly mock it, the power of the sudden scare remains a core and clearly evolving part of our cultural story.
It really is the most effective shortcut to adrenaline we seem to have discovered.
Indeed. Next time on Trending Unpacked, we move from fleeting fright to full-throttle drama exploring Netflix's House of Dynamite, where action, identity, and rebellion explode on screen. Join us then.